One of the key problems for the users of the network that remains unsolved is the lack of predictability of gas prices for the transactions to go through. So even though EIP 1559 as an improvement proposal does not seek to lower the gas fees directly per se, it seeks to make the gas fees more predictable so as to provide a fairer and a more user-friendly experience in the network. How it does this is by replacing Ethereum's existing model of transaction fees. So the transaction fees or the gas fees currently works on an auction model. Anytime people want to send a transaction through the Ethereum network, they place a price on the gas fee. Whoever places a higher price on the gas fee, they get to place their transaction onto the blockchain. Consequence of this is that most of the time people end up underpaying or overpaying, and there is no set way to get the fees exactly right. The fees is generally estimated and set by the wallet that you're using to make the transaction in this case. So the EIP 1559 proposal is seeking to replace this existing model with a new model where the gas fees are much more predictable. Of course, this change has many big implications. It removes a big chunk of revenue from the miners. It brings a deflationary component to the economics of the network. And of course, it is likely to make transacting on the Ethereum network a better experience for the end users. So with that, Nikhil, let's take a deep dive into what EIP 1559 is, the changes it is looking to implement, and what it will mean for the future of Ethereum.
Thanks, KK. So as you very succinctly pointed out, EIP 1559 is this proposal that has been in the works for some time now. It was raised by Vitalik a couple of years back, which seeks to try and address the lack of predictability in the gas fees for a transaction. And the reason why this is important is that as more and more people come and start using the Ethereum network for a wide variety of applications, it has become increasingly harder and harder for people to understand and to calculate an appropriate fee for their transaction. And one of the reasons for this is essentially because the gas fees for Ethereum transactions are calculated using what is known as a first price auction. And in a very basic sense, what actually happens essentially is that for every transaction, you set a certain amount of fees that you're willing to pay for the transaction to execute. And the miners basically, when they include your transaction in the block, they basically get this fee. And you're obviously competing with everybody else in the network to get their transactions in the block. So how the miner basically selects which transactions get into the block is by sorting the transactions by the amount of gas fees that they have, right? So that means that obviously the ones with the highest gas fees get added first. Now, the reason why this is not a very good user experience is that depending on network congestion or the number of transactions, you might end up having to pay more than what you had originally anticipated. And since you don't have that predictability, you might have a transaction that kind of ends up being stuck because the fee that you provided over there was not enough, right? And basically to compensate them against that risk. Usually it is a small amount. And then finally, there is this third value that you put in, which is the fee cap. The fee cap essentially denotes the maximum amount that you are willing to pay. Now, the reason why you want to have a separate value for the fee cap from base fee plus tip is that the base fee itself can change, right? So I'll talk about how that changes a little bit in the future, but know that the base fee basically adjusts according to the block size, and there is a possibility that the base fee that you entered may not be valid for the next block, in which case you can set a fee cap so it can be adjusted up and you can still get into that block. So there is a way for your transaction to still be added even if you did your calculation of what the base fee was incorrect, right? Now, the cool thing about it is though that the difference between the fee cap and the sum of the base fee and the tip is refunded to you, right? So it means that, okay, if you calculated everything correctly and set your fee cap, you will end up paying what you calculated and the rest of it is refunded back to you, right?
Right. So this is
you don't
where
have
the
yeah,
miners
the
used to make.
overpay, exactly. So the where you had the problem of overpaying for a transaction or overpaying the miners, that basically now gets eliminated because you don't have that risk anymore. You can basically set this to be adjusted to be make it optimal for you.
So it looks like, I mean, this is a net positive for the Ethereum ecosystem from the user's point of view, because the whole guessing game of predicting the right transaction fee is taken off. But just to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, can this be looked at from the miner's perspective? Can this be looked at as a new model where the free market sort of doesn't exist anymore? So earlier, a sender, who initiated a transaction had an option to wait a longer period of time for their transaction to clear. And they didn't have a problem with it. They would pay something lesser and just wait through it, right? Like they're not in a hurry to have the transaction go through. Do you think that sort of gets taken away with this new model?
No, you can still continue to wait if you want and hope that, okay, things come down. What this kind of eliminates is the absolute need to do that. So consider the situation where you are a user, right? You got a transaction. You can look at the network, you can try to look at the history of the network, and you can make some guesses, right? But at the end of the day, you do not still have a clear idea of what is the correct price to pay because it's an auction, right? And that auction basically depends on factors that you may not know about, right? So there may be a new token that has been created or a new project that has come online in some part of the world that you are not aware of. And suddenly what you saw for the past 5 weeks or the past month or the past 6 months in terms of gas prices is no longer valid because that project took off and now everything is 10x the transaction value because of the congestion in the network, because of how many people are coming in. And you cannot make a prediction of, okay, fine, I'm going to wait now, and because you already sent out the transaction, right? You made the transaction, you sent it out. Now you could have said, okay, fine, I should have waited, but if you had no knowledge of that particular event, how long do you keep waiting, right? So what gets eliminated from this is that lack of predictability, and the fact that, okay, you can say now that, okay, based on the current network congestion, the base fee is already calculated for you, so you don't even have to think about it. You only look at the tip and you basically say, okay, fine, it looks like the block size, based on the block size, it's not overflowing. The block size is set at, it's still within the normal block size limit. Therefore, the base fee is going to be X,